Hi, and welcome to the Unreal Engine News and Community Spotlight. So first off, I want to give a huge shout out to Jess Hyder from our community team out in the UK. She's done another blog entry in her For Indies series. The first one was marketing for indies, but she's followed that up with an expo for indies. In that blog, she explains how teams should approach going to conventions or expos and how you should set up your booth, which ones to go to, and even talking about the number of individuals you want to assist you and come in. You need somebody to help you grab sandwiches, So Expos can be a long day, and she has a lot of great tips for those of you that have either never been to a convention and are thinking about going, or if you're looking for ways to bolster your appearance while you're at one. So I definitely recommend going and reading that and taking a look. Our second order of business, we announced some more Unreal Dev grants. That's what we're for. If you're unfamiliar, that's a fund where we have a $5 million fund where we're giving out money to teams that are really supporting the community or making some amazing, fantastic games. So in this round, we're giving over $200,000 away to 15 different teams that have either, again, made some really phenomenal games, or they're working on learning resources that they're sharing or translating, and we just really want to give them a huge thanks, and hopefully these funds can help them in their development and keep on doing really amazing things for us. We've also got our top weekly karma earners, so huge shout out to these folks. Top of the list this week is Noctmare again with 305 karma points. We have Ninjin, Shadow River, Pier Pop, C. Marston 74, Death Ray, Phoenix Illusion, Lohoil Poter, Daniel Orchard, and Imda.WMN. So thanks again for all your support and contributing to the community and helping answer people's questions. We couldn't do this without you, so thanks. For our community spotlight, our first team or game that we'd like to highlight is the Hangry Bunnies from Mars, excuse me. So they've made this really bright, colorful world, and it's a VR game, and you have these what appear to be adorable bunnies that turn into these dark creatures with lots of teeth that are coming after you, and it just looks like a whole lot of fun. I really love the world. It actually just released yesterday, so if you want to go to Steam and take a shot and shoot some bunnies, I recommend go grabbing that. Our second community spotlight is Boy Sichterman. He actually created this really wonderful scene here, this industrial scene, and it's got a lot of instance materials, and I just want to say it looked really sharp. I love how you've set it up and made it easily interchangeable, and good job, man. Our third spotlight this week is the Interactive Tree Creator. It's a plugin, or a tool, that they've made to create these dynamic trees in a similar way to something like a speed tree. And there's just so many different different tools and different parameters you can change. You can set up these different, how many branches do you want? What kinds of leaves do you want to put on your tree? And they just look really sharp, really interchangeable, and nice to manipulate. And there's even some cool, you can break your trees. It's really easy to set that up. So great job on this nice tool. Thanks for joining us. That was our news and community spotlight. All right, welcome to the Unreal Engine live stream. I'm your host, Amanda Bott. We have Wes Bunn, one of our senior technical writers, followed by Sam Dieter, another senior technical writer, and Colin Benoit, is that how you say it? Our senior cinematics artist. So thank you guys for joining us.
Sure. Yep.
I'm excited to we have a full house.
I know.
Push the camera way back to get all of us on here.
All right. So you're going to be talking about Composure.
Yes, we're going to be talking about the new Composure sample that was just released. Had planned to do a sequencer stream this week, but Max came on last week and knocked it out of the park, so my plans got disrupted. So thankfully we have Sam here, who's working on some of the documentation for the Composure stream, or Composure stuff, and Colin Benoit, who worked on the Composure sample that we're going to look at here together in a moment. So we got a lot to cover, actually. This is going to be an entry-level stream. Again, the tool set was just released along with the sample. So we're going to walk through the sample and kind of break it down on how it was constructed. And Sam and Colin, feel free to jump in whenever you'd like. So first and foremost, what you'll need to do working with the tool set is to enable the Composure plugin, which some of you already know what this is. If you go to Edit inside your project and plugins, you'll get the plugins menu. You can actually search for it, just Composure, if I type
there it
correctly.
is.
Right there. So yeah, we've already enabled it in this project. We'd come here and just enable it and then restart the editor. You'd also need to...
you click on, I think it's compositing over there.
Compositing?
Yeah, just click on that bad boy.
Yeah,
and
or
then
you can just go to that.
Yeah, get rid of the com and the search filter. You'll see the lens. There we go.
Lens distortion.
Yep.
This is the one that's enabled by default when you enable Composure.
That should be enabled when you enable Composure, because the Composure needs the lens distortion to match the real-world camera.
Okay.
We'll get into that in a little bit.
Yeah. Also, to kind of go along with this is the image plate stuff, which I'm stuck on compositing now, so we're going to come back up here.
Oh.
Yeah, and Sam...
My bad.
Sam. Max kind of covered this last week, the image plate stuff. We're actually going to talk a little bit about this today. Not too much because Max covered it last week, but one of the things that I found interesting about the sample is that it's not actually using this image plate, and it took me a little bit to figure out how it was being done, how the scene was actually being rendered. We're going to talk about that a little bit later as we go along as well, if you're wondering where the image plate is in this sample. So we have the sample up here. You should be able to get the sample off the launcher. If I get my bar up here. If you come to the launcher under the Learn tab, should be featured right there, the Composure compositing framework. And you can just download it and open it up. And that's what we have here and what we're looking at today. So really quickly, if we play back the scene here, this is our scene. And feel free to jump in, Colin, if you'd like, about kind of how this was constructed. We'll play it back a couple times, and we'll talk about the sequence, level sequence that is being used to power this, and talk about each of the shots, some of the different things that are going on in this sequence here.
Sure. Well, we decided to do something a little more complicated than just like a single shot. So we actually went out and filmed this on our patio just outside here at headquarters. And we shot it kind of like you would a 3-camera shoot for a TV show or film. We picked different lenses just to have some variety. And then we went through the process, which we can go into a little later, but just about camera tracking and doing some rotoscoping outside the engine, which was used as input for Composure. to put it all together. And then in Sequencer is where all the magic happens. What you're seeing here. Actually, all the magic really happens in a giant blueprint.
Several blueprints.
Several blueprints, but the Sequencer kind of drives it all. So that's the main basis around it.
Yeah, and it's all running in real time. If you hit the space bar, you see you can change the color of the character right here.
That was put in there specifically
cool. Just
so
to show
that
people that it's running
is
in real
real
time.
Jerome
here.
can show that this is actually happening in real time.
He looks good in pink.
I'm partial to the green.
Yeah.
There you go.
He's hulking out.
So what I would like to do actually is take a look at one of these shots in particular. Let me go ahead and go into the content browser under cinematics, or Cin, and open up the level sequence. And let me just move this over just a little bit. So here's the level sequence that's powering this. If we lock camera, you can see it's kind of just playing back that same sequence here. I wanted to actually talk about this third shot because this is the shot that was really interesting to me. Now right now, we're not seeing the background plates or anything, but if we had those up, you would see the couch kind of masking out the character here, which was really cool. I was interested on how that process, how that was done. So yeah, I don't know if you want to talk about that technique in compositing,
Sure.
what that's actually called, and how people can do something like that.
Yeah, so it's pretty typical compositing where you would basically do an A over B and have a foreground matte that occludes, that's used as an occlusion element, so you can get the CG kind of in between exactly, just like that.
Yeah, I do actually.
That
We
one
can take a look
image,
at
yeah,
that.
we
Sam,
can-
you can jump in on this as well.
We can take a look. So Wes is going to pull up, when I was doing this, a lot of stuff that you see in compositing, if you work with like RGB mask packing or something like that, it's going to be a little familiar to you. And there we go.
Yeah.
So basically what's going on here is packed into the different RGB, and I don't think we used the alpha channel.
We didn't.
Okay,
No.
just the RG and B channels are going to contain, the red is going to be the floor, the blue is going to be foreground, and the green is going to be background. Is that
Actually, we ended up doing, we ended up having them split in case we wanted to do
Okay.
more complicated work. The blue and green are actually together as this foreground occlusion.
Okay.
And that's a specific compositing mode, which we'll get into a bit. And these are color-coded for that, or each channel is used for a specific purpose for the compositing mode.
But the main thing to get out of there is that whatever channel you decide, so if you're going to use blue for your foreground, you need to continue to use that throughout the entire
Correct.
life of your project. And it's the exact same thing when you're working with RGB mask packing. If you pick the green channel to store your AO, it needs to be the same thing throughout your entire project.
Right.
And it's not to say that you couldn't use the alpha channel, we just didn't have need for it.
Yep.
So we had a separate matte pass that looked like this for each shot for the matte, for the either shadow or occlusion.
Do you have that one other
Yep.
one, Wes? Bring that
Yeah,
one
so
up.
this will kind of break down what's happening here.
So yeah,
So-
this one right here. So this right here is something I'll put together for the docs, just so that I would make sure too that I understood how everything goes together. So what this shot is done, or how it's composed, is we have our camera. Then we have this thing called the camera distortion, and this is something that I learned about. But in order to get your digital asset to have the same look as your environment, you actually need to figure out how your lens that you're shooting with is going to
Right.
be distorting the light. You can then take that and mathematically map it or unwrap it so that when you go to render in your 3D application, you will have the same curvature to your image that the camera that you shot it
Camera
with. So everything is going to match. Then what we have after that is we have our digital actor, which is going to be our 3D guy. And then we have the background. If you scroll up just a tiny bit, whoops, maybe.
Okay, it's blocking.
Oh, okay. And right there up at the top, it says foreground. Oh, there we go. So we have our foreground, which is going to have our matte, the red and the green one. Then we're going to have our background, which is going to have our background plate on it. And that's how this particular
That
one
particular
yeah.
image.
And that's how the image right down there was generated. So that's what it kind of looks like. Now, of course, I made the top, the foreground, the background, camera distortion, all that stuff. I made it in 3D Max just to give an idea of how everything is
How
going
it's
to work.
working.
So that's not, if you're trying to, well, how do I see this debug mode or something? That's not a debug mode. This is just an example to show you guys how we got the final image down there at the bottom.
Right. Awesome. Let's go ahead and close that up, move that over. So actually, that kind of leads into something else that we could talk about is the different types of compositing modes. So this particular type of shot here, that would be considered background with a foreground mask?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So
That's correct.
Yeah, we allow you inside of the tool set to define the different types of compositing modes. We've given you a couple templates to kind of work with. So we have background only, background with a foreground mask, or an additive layer that you can use. But the way that this pipeline is set up is that it's completely flexible, that you can come in and create your own. If you'd like to really get into the system and kind of pick it apart, you can do so. So let's go ahead and close this out.
Exactly. We ended up not actually using the additive.
Yeah, I was going to say, I
mode.
didn't
It
see
was
any
just
additive in the
yeah,
shot.
but it's another example that could be used.
Yeah, it's really useful for, let me go ahead and escape out of here. It's really useful for situations like this one here. This one we're using background only because we don't have anything in front of the character. We don't need to do any complex stuff there. It's an optimization that you can make. But on like this shot here where the couch is in front of you, that's where we're doing the foreground mask and using our matte to mask out the character there.
And in Sequencer, these can also be keyed. So actually, for the beginning of this shot, each of these shots is delivered in the sample at their full cut range. So you can basically mix and match. You can create your own master cut if you want, with basically the mannequin showing up, entering frame and exiting frame. And for this shot in particular, he was walking by a pillar early on, if you were to open the shot specifically. Or from the, that's okay. But we had an issue where one of the pillars he should have actually been in front of, and then another pillar later on he's behind. And we had a matte that contained both pillars. So you could actually key the compositing mode to say, actually background only, so he's in front of the pillar at the beginning, and then you can actually just switch that to use the
Background
A over
only.
B.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Awesome.
That's pretty cool.
But we ended up not doing that. We actually changed the matte so that it removed the first pillar out of it. So
Yeah.
a little simpler, but it was something that we did key for the human race.
Awesome. Okay, before we actually move on to talking about some of the blueprints that are powering this, some of the under the hood stuff, was there any other like compositing theories or techniques or anything else that you think we should talk about for those that are completely new to compositing and working with Composure in UE4?
Well,
Or any kind
maybe just to go into a little more detail about what we did outside of the engine. There are a lot of resources out there for camera tracking. So you do, like once you do shoot something, either with your iPhone or with a DSLR, wherever it is, you are going to have to get a virtual camera that matches the motion of that live action camera. So it's something that you would have to do in outside software. And then the rotoscoping, basically the RGB matte that we brought up earlier, that was created also in outside software, something like Nuke.
Okay.
So you will have to, if you don't know anything about those techniques, just VFX pipeline in general,
good.
it'd be something to look at. And then lens distortion as well, like Sam was mentioning. Every camera their lens distortion is like a fingerprint, every lens. So you will need to figure out what the lens distortion is for whatever camera you use. And there are also lots of
It's a huge
lots of
database
resources.
of them.
Yeah, there's actually a website called VFX,
VFX
Database.
Database.
Yeah, that's
Yep.
really good for this. It tells you the film backs that you need to use.
behind the scenes?
Yeah, that's
Here.
our behind the scenes with our.
Is that you right
Roman.
there? That's you, right?
That's me. Yeah,
Look how good that
directing.
shadow composites.
Yeah, look at that.
pretty
It's
awesome.
amazing.
Super realistic.
So yeah, it's just if you're completely new to this, just there's plenty of resources out there for you.
All right. Is this the camera that we used?
So that
One
was
of them.
for the light probes.
Yeah, that's
Oh,
that.
HDRIs.
So the
That
HDRIs,
is
okay.
a bracketed mount, so you set in so it takes the exposure from like super dark to all the way blown out. But the other thing is that it spins around, so it captures all 6 sides that you need to make your lat long
Right.
IBL.
IBL, cube map, HDR map.
Yeah.
We were talking about this yesterday. There's so many names
Yeah.
to call the
All
one
these
thing.
Acronyms make my head
Yeah, but
explode.
once we get into the lighting for this, which I guess we can.
Yeah,
now,
we will get
that's how we approached it. Was image-based lighting for something that's live action will get you much further than trying to use
Tweak it yourself.
Yeah, dynamic lights. And,
Right.
So anyway, so that was the approach we used. You don't have to have that equipment to do that.
No.
No.
So don't be-
I actually was messing around and I did it by shooting a panorama with my iPhone, and then I just it doesn't give you any up or down lighting information, but for just a shot that goes straight across like this, it gave you exactly what you needed to do. All I did was I took it into Photoshop. I made sure it was a size that Unreal could import. Max is 8K. Sized it down, brought it in, popped it on a inside of a shader, and I had my image-based light pro right there.
Yeah.
Or not in the shader. I'm sorry. I put it on the skylight.
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 Awesome. Cool. Moving things along, what I did want to try to do right now is kind of break down some of the blueprints kind of under the hood, how they're kind of working. We're not going to go into extreme detail because there are a lot of things in there that we're going to break out and try to break up with more documentation down the road. But I did want to touch on it a little bit in case you wanted to get in there and start working with it. So there's really 4 main blueprints that are kind of driving it with some enumerators as well. It's this BP Advanced Compositing is like the main blueprint here. It executes the compositing pipeline to display the final output. And in it, you can define the compositing mode, which we showed in Sequencer, that you can also keyframe that so you can change it inside of Sequencer as well. Those compositing modes are background only, background with a foreground mask, or additive layer. I think they're actually different names though inside of
One
here,
is like
background
with
only,
shadows.
shadow and occlusion.
Yeah, shadow and occlusion.
An additive foreground. Shame on me with my notes.
That's okay.
They mean the same thing though. This is the main blueprint that is handling the compositing. We do have a couple other blueprints here. We have this advanced compositing primitive, and this is just a generic interface for any primitive types to work. With this, you can include it in these other 2 blueprints here. So we have an advanced compositing skeletal mesh and a static mesh that implement this interface here. And if I go ahead and select our mesh here and I go to the details panel, you can see since we implemented that interface, we have this primitive compositing mode, and that allows us to define whether the characters, if the mesh or static mesh or skeletal mesh is lit rendering, it's hidden, shadow receiver, or shadow caster. One of the uses that we used for this actually is for the floor. If I escape out of this, and let me go ahead and unlock the camera. Am I locked to the camera? Yeah. So if we look at the floor here, and we scroll down a little bit.
It's so hard to use this on one monitor.
It's totally hard, right?
I have 3 monitors. I have 3 monitors at my desk, and every time I go down to one, I'm just like, what do I do?
Yeah, seriously. This is the static mesh. Advanced compositing static mesh. It's implementing that blueprint interface, so we can set this to hidden, but it receives a shadow, which is allowing us to cast that shadow when we play it back, and the plates are actually taking over.
And one thing to mention here, we do have extra geometry to show the patio,
Yes.
but it's not really used in the compositing.
Right.
It was mainly used for the camera tracking done outside and just visualization. So we were like, it's not just
Where
a
you
ground
are
plane.
in the scene.
Stare at I mean, without that geometry there, it would just be a black scene with the 2 shader, the chrome ball and the 18% gray. You'd have no idea, like, is this guy right? And this whole sample is all about precision.
Yeah.
If it is off by just a tiny fraction of a centimeter, it's still wrong. It's going to render wrong. Like,
It will.
you need to check everything. Precision is very key when it comes to doing this stuff. That I learned the hard way.
It's really just these 4 blueprints. There's some other blueprints in here as well that affect it that we'll break down a little bit later as well. But I did want to highlight those 4 blueprints, specifically this one here, which we can jump into and kind of talk about under the hood, how some of the things are working. If we double click and open this up, you can see there's quite a bit of functions and components and all kinds of things happening here. But what I did want to show you is some of the inputs that are available, some of the various settings that you can use to adjust your scene here. So those are the components. There's the camera. So we have overscan, sensor width and height, exposure settings. We also have, I think we have some, chromatic aberration amounts. These are all things that you can actually keyframe some of these through Sequencer as well. Some of them are exposed, so you can change those via Sequencer.
Quite a few of them.
Yeah, and they're also exposed inside of here. So if you go and select the compositing, where is it? This guy here. All those properties are displayed here in the details panel, so you can change them right here as well. So I kind of wanted to just show that real quick. And then also in the components window up here is where we have all of our different passes and the scene captures that are being used to populate the render targets for the scene. They're all inside of here. We have the different ones like tone mapper, etc. But they're all a child of this pipeline pool component. And I kind of wanted to touch on that because that may be a little bit confusing at first. So the pipeline pool is essentially a collection of all of your render targets, and it's used for allocating render targets and debugging. For example, if we look at, if we go down to the functions here, and we just take a function like the, let's find our functions. Let's go to something like the update tone mapper. So here's our pipeline pool. We're coming in. Here's our pipeline pool. We can allocate a render target, give it a name, and also set the screen percentage, and that's what generates the new render target. And we can also define the gamma, et cetera. And these blueprints are all pretty well commented, so feel free to jump in there and look at the comments for a description. Guillaume did a pretty good job of kind of documenting. That's how I was able to pick it apart with some help from him on some notes and stuff as well. The other thing that the pipeline pool allows you to do is to set the resolution for the pipeline pool directly instead of everywhere in your pipeline. If we go to, let's see, I think it's upline, what is it, which one is it? Process current frame, I think it is. Yeah,
right there, you go.
So it popped it up right to it. So here we are actually setting the size of the render targets to match the viewport size of our player. We're going to talk about this in a second, how this is working, but this allows us to do it in one shot. It's doing it for all the render targets that are under this pipeline pool. So that's kind of how super high level, there'll be more information down the road, but that's kind of how the compositing works. I did want to talk about how it's being rendered, because that's something that was interesting to me as well, again, because we're not using an image plate here. So I was trying to figure out, how's this actually being rendered? There's no plate, no image plate that you're actually rendering it to.
Yeah, this was...
So the rendering part is a little bit different. How it's being rendered is that by default, UE4 automatically draws the scene according to the player's camera, and the compositing pipeline needs to replace this behavior and is done with the Composure player compositing target. So that's a mouthful, but we could take a look at that that node here. It's in, let me see where that's under the init, actually, yeah. So this little node here, or this little function here, we're getting the player controller, and then we're assigning the player compositing target. And what we can do then is override that and feed it a render target, essentially. And we do that in this function here, this set activate state. So what we're doing, we're coming through, setting the activate state, and we're setting the compositing target to the player's camera manager. So we're overriding the player camera manager at this point. If you need to undo that, you could just set it to a null pointer here. That will empty it out. But essentially, we're taking over the player camera manager at this point and assigning our player compositing target. And the last step that we need to do is actually feed this player compositing target the actual render target that we want to use. So what we could do there, that's under update pipeline state. So update pipeline state takes all these passes and all this information, all kinds of stuff that's
Such a
commented
blueprint.
out. I know. Thank you, Guillaume, for commenting this out for us. And essentially, once it's all done, it's going to give us a final render target that we're pushing through to the player compositing target, and that's how it's actually rendered to the screen. So again, super high level, but a general workflow if you want to get in here and start looking at these blueprints, start looking at the comments, kind of pick it apart and make adjustments to the pipeline yourself if you'd like to go that route. One of the other things that we could talk about is scene captures, how the scene captures work, and the compositing primitives. If we go over to the component section here, some of our scene captures here, you can see we have 4 different ones in the pipeline. And this is what we chose to do for this particular example, but we could expand or reduce this if you so desire based on your needs. But I did want to point out a couple things. Scene captures are by default configured to be automatically drawn every frame after all actor and components have ticked. The way that the Composure pipeline works is by manually regenerating these commands. So render the material in this render target and then do bloom of this input texture, etc. That's how we're doing it. We're manually regenerating this every frame instead of having it called. We're manually doing it. So what we do is on the scene capture components, we go down to the details panel down here. You'll see that we've actually turned off the capture every frame and capture on movement because we're doing this manually. We've chose to leave on always persist rendering state just so that we get temporal AA, camera motion blur, and other low-level optimizations despite capture every frame being off. So that's why we do that. And then we manually refresh every frame in the compositing pipeline itself. So we go up here, we have a, let's see, I think it's under update scene capture function. Somewhere in here.
It's
Point
at
it
the top right there.
Yep, there it is.
There we go.
That's what I was looking for. Awesome. And let's see. So this is allocating the render target, and then down here is where we're actually doing the rest of our process, updating every frame. This is being called every frame. There's one thing to note about this. This is something you ran into as well, right? When you were working with the quick start about the level blueprint and post update.
Yeah.
So it even Guillaume made this yellow warning here that this needs to be evaluated post update to avoid a 1 frame latency.
You will get your, I think it's your camera is like 1 frame
It's
behind.
1 frame
Yeah,
behind,
1
yes.
frame
Yeah.
behind your actual character. So you'll, I don't know, things won't
Kinda-
match up a little
Yeah.
bit. You can see actual popping, like there'll be a distinct difference between where the character is and the edge of the mask. It'll look like there's like a little bit of, I don't know, pixel swimming or something right in between where those two meet.
Yeah. So
Yeah, if you pop open the blueprint.
yeah, it's actually in the level blueprint here is where that was done.
Yeah.
So yeah, under class defaults in the level blueprint, we've set the tick group here to post update work.
And then there's
There's
a,
also there's some other stuff in here too.
it's not that, it's on the, it's this right
This,
here,
yeah.
process the current frame.
Well, you need to actually call it to process the frame. So I kind of got that when I was digging through these blueprints, but you can kind of step through and see how it's working. in
Yeah,
that
I was
tick.
expecting it to go on the image plane, and I didn't.
That's what I did too.
This is why it took me so long to figure this part out, because I'm like, oh, how does this stuff show up? And I
Yeah.
went through everything, and then I was like, just gonna look on the level blueprint. Oh, there's a bunch of stuff in here. Aha, okay.
Yeah. Actually, I might have to ask you why you did it this way, because you could
Well,
do that inside of the
So
compositing pipeline.
this whole thing is all set up to be as modular as
Yeah.
possible, so you can mold it and shape it to the exact needs of whatever your project is going to be, because each project is going to be different. Every a TV show, a cartoon, a movie, a digital short, a commercial, like everything is going to have different needs. You might have one where you only need to shoot, foreground stuff, or you might just
Right.
have all A over B or shadow with occlusion. So you can get rid of a lot of things to give you back rendering power that you don't necessarily need. So while there's a ton of options in here, the reason they're all there is because of the unparalleled flexibility that the system has.
Right.
Yeah, when we did the human race, it was built very structurally towards that goal of doing that short. And then Guillaume ripped the wires out and built this so that it was, just like Sam said, incredibly
Modular enough.
customizable.
Awesome. Yeah, so if you'd like to, that would be a good place to start inside the level blueprint. This process current frame, just double click, kind of step through the process. All the functions will take you from one to the next. You can kind of see a step-by-step process on how it's working under the hood. And again, we'll have some more documentation on this stuff down the road. I know Sam's been working on some stuff.
We have
as
a
well.
deep dive doc where Guillaume, the gentleman who wrote this entire thing, goes down and basically breaks everything down. I just received that, so we wanted to get you guys up and running with this. So you're going to find the quick start and the doc pages, which will get you up and running. We're actually going to, in that one, we recreate the third shot from, not from scratch, but from a new level.
Right.
And then you utilize basically everything that's within here. And then, the deep dive goes down and actually drills down to like, hey, this node does this
Right.
part of the blueprint needs to be connected in this particular way, and so on and so forth.
I mean, even if you don't want to deep dive into the blueprint right now, a lot of those functions are exposed to cinematics. So in Sequencer, you can add bloom, and you can add you can do color corrections, you can do shadow color corrections, edge wrap, things that a compositor might want for some basic tweaking, color grading. So all that stuff is available now.
Yeah, sure,
And
bring
we
up your
did use
docs.
it.
Yeah, so your doc pages, I'm actually using your sample doc page. That might not be the right one, but we do have the quick start page. If you
Yeah.
haven't seen that yet, it should be. Is it linked?
It's live now, and
Okay.
it's linked.
I think it's
in
linked from the
I'm
down.
pretty sure
from
it's
the-
linked from here.
this, right? Yep.
Yeah, there we go.
Oh, I should
Yeah,
have just
so
did that. There you go. Yeah, so there you go.
And voila,
So-
we've got the Composure docs.
Yeah, I think we had one question about this too a little bit later on the end of the step that we could get to at the end of the session today. Somebody had a question on that we'll talk about. Cool. So we talked about under the hood, how it's kind of working, how things are being composited. Do we want to talk about the lighting of the scene a little bit?
Yeah, so there were some Unreal is a game engine, We're not a compositor. We're going that way, and we're making huge strides to that direction. One of the things that they ran into is, well, if we want to have multiple characters, and we want to do that's in the shadow, but also a guy in the light, well, we're going to need to use 2 different image-based light probes, which unfortunately our skylight system only supports one right now. So, in order to get around that, Jerome used a just a ridiculously awesome use of the dot product. So basically, so what we have here is we have our sky dome with our interior lighting. If you click on the light there for me, the actual skylight itself, if you see over there on our sky distance threshold, it's set to 50 centimeters. So basically, all we are doing is we are capturing what image is placed on that light, that sphere. The reason that we want to do this is if you click on the sphere and then you go to his material, and you see the material's kind of doing this little weird flutter. What we're doing is we are actually lerping in between an exterior image-based light probe and an interior image-based light probe.
Shadow and light.
Yep, shadow and light. Shadow and light.
That's the easier way to say it.
Yeah, that's the easier way to say it. Sorry.
Under the patio.
Yeah, under the patio, outside of the patio. What we're doing down there is basically, and you can go over to the right a little bit, but what this little code is doing right here is basically it's creating a gradient. So it says, as I start to get closer and closer to the shadowed part, we're going to increase the shadowed image-based light maps, and then we are going to decrease the one that's in direct lighting. Yeah, we're going to basically crossfade between the two of them.
We ended up shooting, it was like 6 or 7 light probes, and then went down to 2.
Yeah, Jerome did a lot of work on it, and
Jerome and I both have VFX backgrounds, so it was sort of a...
Yeah, I was actually using this little
and that's the blueprint.
here.
If you open that blueprint up, and basically...
Yeah.
That's it.
Yep.
No, that's it, yeah.
And all he's doing
Just blending
is...
between the two.
Yeah, he just blends between the two based off of the angle that little light actor is.
It depends on where the character is, because
Yeah.
he's also tracking here. And that gets
That's
into...
what that little light position blueprint that's on him.
It's
is.
just an empty actor that is
just so we can
following.
determine if he's in the shadow or into the sun. But it's interesting, like you mentioned, the skylight, how it affects the scene. If we had another character in the sun, for example, the one in the sun would receive the same lighting as the guy in the shade, whoever you're tracking.
Yep.
It's just kind of a limitation that we're kind of currently investigating, but we did want to show that it's possible to go from one extreme to the other. Did you want to talk about the fake AO stuff that we're doing? That's kinda cool
I
too.
was like, there was another one, but
Yeah,
yeah.
we did this
so-
for an optimization reason, I'm pretty sure.
Well, yes, and this is also a great
Great
way.
use of it.
This is done in Showdown as well, and I think they do it in Bullet Train and in Robo Recall. But basically,
Show it here.
right there. Okay, stop right there. Yeah, it's
Well, let me do this.
see.
Maybe we'll do this.
There you go.
There we go.
Up.
Okay, hit G really quick so we can.
G.
Yeah, get rid of the grid as Z fighting with the ground. There we go. And
You can kind of see it there.
so it's very subtle, but it's ambient occlusion, so it's supposed to be very subtle. But in order to get that
See
type
there.
of in
Contact
order to
channel.
get that type of AO, that detail right there, we could spend a lot of time and a lot of processing power actually getting the screen space AO to do it, or you could just take a slightly blurred texture and then scale it based on the distance your foot is from the ground,
Right.
to give you this really nice soft shadow. And that is exactly
That's
what this
what's happening
does.
here.
There's
Yeah.
there's the AO decal, and that is basically going to have its intensity and it's mapped to a plane. So the plane is going to, like, as you get
Expand
further
and
away, it's
contract.
going to expand and contract to give you these really awesome soft shadows. Now, again, this is a great trick for stuff that's done in VR.
It's cheap. It's a
on
cheap way to fix
mobile,
stuff, yeah.
anything that you want some really great looking soft shadows, but they need to be on the cheap.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of Blueprint. Normally, to get something like this, you'd probably have to talk to maybe a tools programmer or talk to somebody, who can throw some stuff together for you. It's really easy to do, but the problem is that programmers have like 100 tasks. So while it might be easy, they don't have a clone. That's where the beauty of Blueprints come in, is that Jerome was able to do all of this in a production setting without having to consult an engineer, without having to take somebody else's time away from the project. Everything he was able to do just using blueprints, building tools.
I'll be able to see it here a little bit better too. Let's see. Just step through.
Yeah.
Fake shadow. Yeah.
There we go, right there. Yeah, you
there.
can see it
The
right there.
fake
That's
shadow's
perfect.
being generated by that. It's cool.
Yeah.
It's awesome stuff. Okay, so we talked about the blueprints, how it's being powered under the hood, some of the lighting stuff. Do we want to jump into some of the sequencer stuff now, how it's actually set up, and how you can start to experiment with these blueprints? And we'll jump into a quick sample that I did, having coming into this blind, because I just started working with this myself, how you can use the existing templates and blueprints, expose parameters, and make your own sample scene. So
Yeah, I mean, Sam's quick start guide is great at just showing you how to set up a basic shot in sequencer. I mean, if you punch into one of those, it's surprisingly easy. You've got a camera. Again, it has to be tracked outside. You're just going to import it with as an FBX.
There's an FBX that you actually download in the dock, and Colin just all he
already
did was
tracked.
clean it up for me a little bit, so it doesn't go all crazy in the frame ranges when you import it.
Right.
But other than that, that's exactly the camera that we got back from the people that did the camera match move.
Yeah, exactly. And then you just add that compositing pipeline blueprint, and then you can add. I mean, you need at least an input 0, which is your background plate.
Right.
Input 1 in this case is the matte, so the occlusion
Oh yeah, I
or
forgot.
shadows.
Turn that off.
quick, yeah.
Oh yeah.
That's
We
a
turn-
handy tip.
we turn it off.
You can turn off the thumbnails just to.
It makes it go so much faster.
Yeah. We've talked to Max about that.
So yeah, there's our background.
But then you can continue to add other things. You need a compositing mode. If you happen to shoot with a camera that is so flat you don't have any distortion, you don't have to worry about that. But if you do, you need to add some distortion.
Right.
A distortion map.
Displays a map, yeah.
Also based on an image sequence. He goes into some detail about the overscan sensor height and width. That is based on a technique for solving lens distortion and how a lot of software packages do it. It actually changes the film back.
Right.
So you just have to figure out from that software package like what that overscan height and width is. The camera itself should be the actual film back of whatever camera you use.
Right.
So,
And a lot of these numbers will come for you.
Yeah, these
you
are all-
You don't have to come up with this stuff yourself and like, how do I measure my camera sensor?
and these are all based on, I don't even know if we put out what camera we shot it with, but
I don't think
it was
so.
a
No,
Sony.
we did not.
Yeah.
We can do that
We can
though.
find out, yeah.
We could
Yeah,
add that. That's a good
that
point.
might not be a bad idea. And we had a zoom lens we shot with 3 different focal lengths.
One thing I want to bring up, and we'll bring this up again, it's very important to use 24 FPS and
Or
not just
whatever
either
you're shooting at.
24
Yeah.
or whatever it is you happen
You're
to be
shooting.
shooting at.
And that's what we just shot it at 24.
24, so you have to match it inside of sequence right here.
We
And not,
we like the
not
look
just
of film,
like
so-
24. Make sure it's 24 film because 24 frames per second is not 24 FPS film.
Yeah.
Yes.
I typed in 24 originally and it wouldn't line up, and I'm like, why is this not working? It said 24.
Do you know what the difference is?
I have no idea.
I
Alright.
have no idea. either.
Mystery.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Get on that.
But yeah, I mean, you can shoot 30 or whatever.
I was
you shoot
hoping
at.
you were going to drop some
25
knowledge on
if
us
you're-
right here. I was like,
Oh, do you
sweet.
know?
I have no idea, but I'm willing to find out.
I can ask Max. Max probably knows. I can ask him.
That seems.
What the difference between just 24 and
24 FPS
film.
and 24 film.
But I think it's probably a sequencer.
It's probably a
issue.
sequence.
No.
Yeah, I'll check with Max. Run it back.
No, I think it's
Maybe it's
supposed to say
seconds.
like if you're working in film, it's normally 24. PAL obviously it's
Might be
25.
seconds.
But 24.
When you're a film school.
Oh yeah, if you type 24,
I
maybe
think
it
it's
did go to
seconds.
seconds.
I think
It
it's.
might
I'm
be.
pretty sure
It
it's
might be
seconds.
seconds. It might be 24 seconds because I just
Instead of
typed in
frames, 'cause
24.
it's
so it was
frames
like
are-
way
yeah.
off.
Yeah, yeah. So
Okay, it was way off.
way off.
Alright.
It was like
Yeah.
way off.
Well,
Don't
we
do
have
that.
seconds here. We have
Yeah.
frames per second. So I'm pretty sure it's.
Okay.
Okay,
is what it
that
is.
makes way more sense. Then it's probably 24 seconds. That's
That must have been it.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah. Because
good.
it was way off.
Good
Way
to know.
off.
Good to know.
But anyway, you can keep adding. It's like right here we have a shadow color grading.
All of those
track.
properties are exposed in the details panel. These you can keyframe all of these. So you can change, edge light wrapping.
Correct.
All kinds of stuff in here that are exposed
and-
parameters.
Sorry, in 417, the distortion map is only the distortion map is your camera distortion, and that is not going to change unless you jump shots that's shot with another camera lens, correct?
Well, we changed focal length, so from shot to shot, the distortion did change slightly.
But what I'm trying to get at is you're only going to need
Oh,
one,
yes.
you only
Sorry.
need one distortion map. Sorry, I was
Yes,
explaining
per
this in the
shot.
wrong way. You only need one per shot, but you will have multiple ones if you do anything that changes the way the lens goes
Correct.
from shot to shot.
Yeah,
Right.
that is correct. And right now, our distortion map image plate sequence is set to FPS of 0, which basically says it's a single frame. And that's because it's a static distortion map. So it's the same distortion across the entire shot. If you did have a zoom lens that you were zooming during the shot and you did solve distortion across that, then you're crazy, or you work in a visual effects company. You can do it. I mean, you just add it.
When you
and
said that, I'm like, oh, dude, you just said you have to have like a million
No. You can have it'd be this exact same thing. It's just one track, and it would just be animated, just like the footage is.
Okay.
And it'd be a 24 FPS or whatever.
You'd have to have one for each.
Yeah, which is
each
fine.
frame,
Like, and
okay.
then the camera tracking software would output a distortion map per frame. But most people don't even go there, and I would not recommend it right now. Sorry, I even brought it up.
Let's see footage here. Just want to talk about the image plates.
Yeah.
So some of the wildcard setting and frame rate is very important as well. I think Max covered a little bit of image plates last week. How you point to the sequence path, the file card or file wildcard. Do we know what wildcards we support? Is it just all image based? Because I know I did mine when I did my sample. I didn't use EXR. I used PNG.
PNGs, yeah.
So is it just those, or is there?
I think you could put other.
I think we said last week just pretty much anything that our texture files and things support.
Okay,
as
so it's the
long
same,
as
yeah.
It's one of those.
Yeah.
DDS it is then. I'm just joking. Don't use DDS.
And this is all using uncompressed EXRs,
Yeah.
which run incredibly fast.
Yeah. That
Yeah,
brings
that's-
up another point too.
Yes.
The proxy
and-
versus full res. Where is
Right.
that in it? Is that
So that's project settings.
project
I do
settings,
believe.
right?
Yeah, by default. So if you download the sample, you'll get 2 sets of images. That's why it's so huge. I apologize.
I know people were like,
This
oh,
is actually
why is
funny.
it
I
so
got rid of
big?
dial-up.
It's because of all the uncompressed EXRs.
There's a funny
Yeah.
story there. When we were packaging this up to build, they're like, hey, do you know the sample is like X amount of
Giant.
gigs? And I'm like, well, yeah. And they're like, you don't seem concerned about this at all. I'm like, well, dude, each one of those mats is like 45 megabytes.
Yeah, and there's like 200 of them.
It's like 300 seconds long. So, you know.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
a lot. So, but by default, you're pointing to the proxies. The proxies are like half HD res.
Right.
Full res is full HD, 1920 by 1080. Feel free, if you've got a streaming machine, to put it. If honestly, just to change it, you just type in
full res, yeah.
res. I think it's in your.
It should be in the doc.
The doc.
Pretty sure it is.
No, if not, it'll get there when
so
we cover it a little bit more.
Go for
extensively.
it. It'll look prettier. Or if you're going to do
When
a
you
render.
render it out,
Yeah,
yeah,
and
that's
like when we
probably-
rendered it out, we punch it to full res.
Yeah, because this project is almost as big or bigger than the Kite demo. And people are like, but it doesn't have as much content. I'm like, it's got these really high resolution masks inside of it, guys.
Yeah, it's got a lot.
Yeah.
Cool. So yeah, I guess what we can talk about now is really quickly some of the work we did on. I worked with you on the additional sample, really quick.
Yeah.
So let's just take a quick look at this. So let's see, using the existing blueprints and exposed parameters. Might take a second to open this up. Created another scene using the same character really quickly. And let's see here. So if we zoom out, so it's just the character kind of walking on the plane here. We set this to receive shadows so that we have shadows as the character's walking across the ground here. Essentially, when I rendered it out, we came up with, let's bring this up. So we have this little sample here. So we have like the Berlin Bridge. And we have our character kind of walking in
Hey,
here
I know
now.
that guy.
Hey, what's the mayor?
What's
and
he
the
doing
character
there?
passes in front. So yeah, kind of the same thing, but just different.
He's on vacation.
Yeah, I know, right? He's tired of walking on the
patio?
epic patio up there.
I get
Change it up, I guess. Right?
Right.
So yeah, and this was just following the examples, using the inputs here. If we go back to our shots, let's see if we open it up. So it's just one long shot. We changed the compositing method because we have the character that kind of passes in front. So that kind of masks out our character. We have our background and the mat. That if you wanted to talk about that real quick, just the process for people that aren't familiar.
So I did a
So we kind of talked about it earlier, but
really brilliant roto pass of the dude walking in front of the.
Yeah.
So I just did this in Nuke.
In Nuke, okay.
Yeah. With the roto paint nodes.
And there's tutorials out there.
Yeah.
Because this is outside of Unreal Engine, but if you're
I'm
curious
not
on
a roto
how this
artist,
works,
so but
in our minds,
yeah. But look at that, it's beautiful.
It worked
Amazing.
pretty good.
Yeah.
I mean,
Looks like something
enough.
Banksy's would
It,
make.
I mean, it did take long, just and
Yeah.
it was good enough.
good
We
enough to
used it.
communicate.
Did you use that same image and
Yeah.
you just like once you did it once you just like panned it across, or did you have to make
Kind of. I
multiple
mean,
ones?
you create a roto paint node and then you add.
we didn't do
like
it on the last guy
Bezier.
either.
Okay,
curve
so it'll
around
solve
it.
it as it goes to the next frame.
Well, you're sort of, yes, yeah.
Okay.
I tried to make it interpolate as much as I could, and then I tweaked.
It looks good. We'll give you the
Thanks.
Oscar.
All right.
Visual effects.
Yeah,
Although
there
we
we
didn't
go.
do it on this guy at the
Nope.
end, so
I see
I
nothing.
ran out of time.
you know nothing.
Right.
Awesome.
That's great.
Well, cool. Yeah, that's kind of the basics that we wanted to cover here today. Again, this is just getting started. You can feel free to experiment with the sample and kind of pick it apart and kind of play with it, kind of like I did.
Please do.
Yeah, there's tons of more documentation that will be coming that we'll try to put out for you. I guess we can go to some of the questions now.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
they-
also don't forget this tool's still under active development,
Yes.
so it is going to be changing
Yeah.
for the better, making things just easier to
But we got a lot of
use.
questions.
There's a lot more. They've been obviously asking questions
Yeah.
that you've been going through. So
Okay.
Awesome.
Um,
We can answer as much as we can on time, however we are on
Yeah,
time, but
sure.
we'll try to answer whatever we can.
let's see. Is it possible to render separate passes in case you need more advanced video editing tools later on?
I think we talked about this earlier.
Yeah, I mean,
we
the-
talked about
the-
this
yeah.
offline.
The basis, I mean, the main reason for developing Composure was not to
Not
do
to
that.
do it, yeah.
It was to work in the engine and have live compositing.
Right.
That being said,
It is
you
possible.
could absolutely do passes.
Yeah.
For now, it would be something you would have to set up to export.
Yeah.
And
so we don't have any kind of like.
yeah, you
export.
kind of like render passes.
You could export out. I mean, they export out like the world normals and all of that stuff, but I don't know if that would be as useful because I don't know if it gets distorted. Yeah.
Yeah, you could do it here.
You
too.
can do it
You can do it inside
exactly.
of
It would be
Sequencer.
like inside the sequencer render settings or render.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
so
believe there's a doc page that I wrote.
Yeah,
for
yeah.
this.
There's a doc page
Yeah.
on it because I use that doc page to dump
Yeah.
some stuff out.
but we don't have the
Like a
concept
different-
of exporting AOVs, so you can tweak the highlights
Right.
in Nuke or something.
Or like export the depth so you can do something.
Yeah.
But you can
could render
experiment.
it out,
But
yeah.
that wasn't the main goal. Was to try to keep as much in engine as possible.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Okay.
They're wondering, can we composite footage during gameplay, or is it limited to non-interactive segments?
That's what Guillaume had said, right? Like this was.
That is the end goal for the end
Yeah.
goal for this thing is whenever you need to take digital footage and composite it with real, or I should say a digital asset and composite it with
With real
real world
footage.
footage. That is the point of Composure.
Mhm.
Can Composure do that right this second? Well, it's Unreal, so it's open source. So yeah, sure, if you want to go out and code it, totally do that. But for people like myself who don't have those mad C++ chops, this is on the way. It's not there yet, but
Yeah.
that is the end goal. That is the line in the sand. Is what we want. We want to be able to take this, and you use something like your phone or a Tango or a headset or whatever, and you
Whatever
can
you shoot.
composite a CG character with
And-
with the real world footage.
Yep.
You could also, if you wanted to, composite CG with CG. I mean, you could.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you have
Yeah.
some wacky idea that you want to do and you want to make it look really cool with different cameras shooting different things and compositing those together inside a game,
Yep.
go for it.
Yeah.
There's nothing holding you back for that.
Let's see. So do we have to care about different video resolutions, or can you do high res and the downscales automatic based on your viewport, or is that something you need to be really?
You just have
Careful
to,
with.
when you're creating your footage, you can use whatever, if you want to go crazy and have some 4K footage, you can.
Yeah.
The way we have it set up is we have a footage directory, and then below that we have different resolutions.
Yeah.
And then you can name them whatever you want.
Yeah.
Like my resolution 1, 2, and 3, and then like Wes was showing you in the project settings, you can just change change those on the fly, and then you can be looking at 4K footage versus half HD footage.
Yeah.
But it's
It's
whatever
going to
you
look
want.
bad if you try to mix them together, though,
I think so,
in your
yeah.
final
Oh,
product.
yeah.
In your
Yeah,
final
you'll
product.
In your
notice.
final, yeah.
Yeah, you're gonna see the 4K footage versus the 1080p footage. Like you will see a visual difference between the two.
But I think it makes sense, depending on what kind of rig you have, like to have low-res footage that you use for working.
Yeah.
And then,
I mean,
crank it up.
that's what
if
we
you,
did with
if you do,
Human
if-
Race too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, if you're
working like that.
like the end goal is to have some outputted linear content rendered, crank it up.
Yep.
Awesome. Can you do this with 360-degree videos?
Oh man.
The question isn't can you, it's would you really want, would you want to? I mean,
I bet Guillaume would say yes, but
I'm
I,
sure you could.
a 360 video from the stereo pano thing is literally just outputting an image sequence. So
Yeah, if it's an image sequence,
just
you
like
can
other,
composite
yeah, it's
any
just like
3D
other
asset
any
on
other,
top of it.
Yep,
Yeah, it
just
totally
like
could.
any other linear media. But the thing is that it would be better to just put that object you want into what you're capturing with the stereo panel capture tool, because then you don't have to worry about getting the exact lighting, shooting your lighting probe,
Yeah.
setting the lighting probe up, color matching. If you can just capture it at the source, it's much better to go that way.
I see.
Let's see. Did Composure do a lot of the camera tracking, or is that all from
it's all
Oh,
outside.
outside?
Yeah.
And then,
So just Google that. And I can mention some software, but it's not. I mean, there's a bunch out there.
Yeah.
yeah, they were.
We want the
Studios-
cheap software.
I was gonna say like studios use like 3D equalizer. There's Synthize.
Mr. Lucasfilm over here. Oh,
mean,
just
but-
we'll go buy this. Oh wait,
Or write
it's
your own.
20,000 a seat. I don't think we can afford that one.
No.
Yeah, let's see. Some folks were asking, and I think you already addressed this a little bit earlier, if there was sort of a plus alpha way of exporting. So if you wanted to do in-game elements and then composite outside, say in like Nuke, but
Oh,
you kind
yeah.
of said that wasn't really.
It's the same thing with passes. That
Yeah.
you probably have to set up something to do that. We encourage not doing that.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Yeah,
'Cause
so
we have lots of
look at
cool
the sequencer documentation too on exporting on the render movie settings. I think there's a way to do that there. We can render the different passes, and then you can probably work with it
And
that way.
if you're thinking of doing that, think about what it is that you want to do in Nuke or whatever compositing software you're going to use, and look at if Composure does that already. And if it does, great, and experiment. If it doesn't, let us know, because we're going to be
Developing this
expanding it,
tool,
and developing it. We want.
I mean, right now, the reason that we have the compositing modes that we have, or those are the ones that we needed to use for the projects that we have been working on.
Right.
Exactly.
So if
The-
we had been working on something else that required multiply or divide or
Right.
something like that, we would have added those. Speaking of multiply and divide, if you're like, well, I don't understand what these compositing methods are and what they do, it's very similar to layer blends inside of Photoshop. Basically, is what you want to implement. There's, divide, pen lights, inverse, a whole bunch of that, all the stuff, overlay, all that stuff that you see inside of Photoshop. That is the similar things that we're talking about at a very high level. Now, I'm sure there's somebody out there that's like, no, he's wrong because, but at a very, very high level, that is what they do.
I'll do one more. And so they mentioned at the end of the quick start, we mentioned you could also use Composure for an augmented reality experience where the backplate texture is a video feed from the camera. They would like to know if we're referring to an actual camera feed, like a webcam, or do we mean the camera actors?
So that is actually like a camera feed from, your phone or a webcam or something like that. That is not something that is currently available. That is something that is planned. Again, when I touched on earlier, like, hey, we've drawn a line in the sand, and that line in the sand is use Composure anytime you want to composite real-world footage with digital footage, or digital footage with digital footage. I guess even real-world footage with real-world footage as well.
Oh, yeah. We did.
That's when you're going to want that. That functionality will come on a little bit later, but that is the end goal for this particular tool, is to have the ability to very easily go outside and shoot something with my iPhone, bring that back in, and then get to work, putting in my little digital character and stuff like that. And it's not that simple yet, but it will be.
Awesome. I think we're going to wrap it up for today. I wanted to thank you all so much for coming in. a lot of really cool stuff going on in Composure, and hopefully maybe we can do a deep dive sometime and really get into some of the nitty gritty of it. There's a lot happening here.
Yeah, we'll have
Yeah.
to get Guillaume in here.
Guillaume.
And
Yep.
I'll have to go
Figure
find
out
him and be
His little
like,
box.
I know.
is he in a
You
different?
can.
Yeah,
All
he's in
right.
we gotta make
So,
him stay up later. That he does
I'll just have
already.
one of you come sit in though and like be the hands
Be the body.
underneath. Yeah, yeah,
That'll
yeah.
work.
So,
Awesome.
thanks again. I'd like to say, we're still, Gamescom is still going on. So if you're out in Cologne, stop by and say hello to the folks from Epic that are hanging out there. Next week, we'll be announcing our August NVIDIA Edge winners. So stay on the lookout for that. I'm going to be, again, dropping a live stream survey. So if you want to tell us how we're doing, what you like about the streams, we'd love to know and have your feedback. And as always, keep tabs on us on Twitch, Twitter, Facebook, and all that jazz. So we'll see you next week. Thank you.
Awesome.
See ya.
Bye.